how can Boris Johnson issue a statement saying he's accepted Matt Hancock's apology, and as far as he's concerned, the matter is closed? Does he really think the public are going to accept this?
Well, I think that remark is extraordinarily high-handed arrogance, and it will go down extremely badly, far worse indeed than it did with Dominic Cummings. And on that occasion, Tory MPs were inundated with angry emails and texts and other communications from people in the public who had been loyally following all of the diktats of this pandemic lockdown. And they will be appalled, not just by what Hancock has done and been photographed in flagrante doing, but tied in with the UEFA thing, with people being allowed to swan in large numbers, no quarantine. It's one law for them and it's another law for the rest of us, and people won't tolerate that.
They really won't. I mean, you must have some knowledge of Boris Johnson with your contacts in Westminster. I mean, what on earth is he thinking that he can just sort of make this high and mighty announcement and expect us all to let it go? I mean, we can't allow the health secretary to break the COVID rules in the middle of the health department. I mean, it's just a disgrace, isn't it?
Well, the idea that this is a strictly private matter is for the birds. This was an act seen in company time, on company premises, by a company security camera. And when I say company, I mean taxpayers. Taxpayers are paying for this private relationship, and they won't put up with it. It is not private. It is the conduct of a senior minister of state and someone who is supposed to be telling us what to do in order to avoid infecting our families. I wonder what his wife thinks, seeing him snogging this woman and taking home potentially a pandemic virus that he's going to spread to the family.
Exactly. I mean, as I keep stressing, I feel very sorry for his wife and children, who he's obviously treated appallingly. But that is not the crux of this story. It is not his lack of morality when it comes to a responsibility to his family. It is his lack of obeying his own rules in the middle of the health department. Plus, there must be serious questions asked about why he hired this woman as well to be an advisor. I mean, that looks like very amorous advice that he's getting from her in the middle of the health department, doesn't it? Lots of questions to be answered here. Boris cannot just wave this away, can he?
No, I think this one will come back to hit him in the face. And in fact, under any other prime minister, I think that Matt Hancock would have been gone already. And dragging it out, as he will, until finally he has to act, is doing him even more damage. And I think that Matt Hancock wasn't just breaking his own advice or his own rules. He was breaking the law as it stood at that particular time. And he was not exactly gloating over the decision of Neil Ferguson to resign. He was saying he was speechless and that Neil Ferguson was doing the right thing after a very similar episode involving his girlfriend. And the point that you're making is the correct one. How long has this affair been going on? We're led to assume that it was only something that began after her very strange appointment to a very senior position at the very heart of the health department. But they've known each other for 20 years. And the idea that this is something that just spontaneous combustion in the office one day is pretty hard to swallow. And I think that most of the general public will not swallow it.
What's your prediction, Trevor? I mean, I just don't think that Boris can get away with this. I mean, he weathered a lot of problems when he stood by Priti Patel when she was found guilty of bullying at the Home Office. He stuck by her and she remains in place. He took a lot of criticism for that. But this is far more serious and he can stand by Matt Hancock as much as he likes. I think that in the end, or sooner rather than later, he is going to have to bow to pressure and do something. Would you agree?
Yes, I think you're right. This goes to the crux of the most serious crisis and emergency facing this country in peacetime. And there you have the person right at the very heart of it, the decision maker, the person who is helping to create the rules by which everybody else by law must comply, breaking those very laws. And I think that we haven't seen the end of this by any means. Tomorrow's newspapers will be very worrying reading for the Prime Minister. More of this will emerge that we haven't seen yet. And I think that basically he will be dragged kicking and screaming out of the health department. But this will damage Boris personally. The fact that he's prepared to stand by someone who's broken these rules so blatantly at the expense, in the eyes of the general public, of the rest of the population, I think will incrementally erode the trust of the British people in this Prime Minister.
I mean, call me naive, Trevor, but, you know, surely we still have the right to expect a scintilla of integrity from our secretaries of state. Matt Hancock has proved today that he has not an iota of integrity at all, does he?
Well, I have to agree with you, Kevin. I'm not a Matt hater, like many people are, which doesn't exactly help his chances of survival. But here he has behaved extraordinarily badly to his wife and family, to his girlfriend's husband and family, but to the people of Britain who have been, for the most part, following diligently the rules that Matt Hancock has laid down. And when people have not been able to say goodbye, to kiss their parents goodbye as they are in old people's homes because of the risk of spreading the disease, and he's snogging his girlfriend in his own office under the eye of an MI5 installed security camera, I think that's a bit rich for any taste.
If you were a betting man, I'm sure you're not, Trevor, but if you were, would you put money on Matt Hancock having to go before too long?
I would put money on it, but I would be dismayed enormously if he stayed. And I simply cannot see, frankly, how he can continue to do his job, to front up in front of the cameras, as he does, like a jack in the box, almost every 10 minutes, and answer questions, many of which will be about this appalling breach of trust and the breach of a law that he laid down.
And what kind of advice is Boris Johnson getting in number 10 Downing Street? If he's arrogant enough to assume that he can wave this through and just say, as far as I'm concerned, the matter's closed, that's one thing. But surely he must have advisors who would tell him, listen, Boris, I think this might be the moment you have to take a stand. The public will not bear this. What kind of advice is he getting? This is, disastrous, isn't it?
Yes, this is not some small story that might fade away in the public eye. This is going to get bigger and the flames are going to grow higher and hotter. And I think that in the end, as I say, he'll be lucky to last the weekend, and Boris eventually will see this. But what people will remember will be the delay between the being caught in flagrante in his office and the moment when he finally has to be dragged kicking and screaming out of it. And it is that will be laid at the feet of Boris Johnson, as over the coming months and years, he needs to rely on the faith and trust of the British public in his premiership. And I think this is causing him an enormous amount of damage, which he doesn't seem prepared at the moment to understand.
As you mentioned earlier, Trevor, this comes on the back of the what many people think was the outrageous exemption handed to 2,500 UEFA VIPs who will come for the Euros final at Wembley. So there's a one rule for them, one rule for us situation. Now we have the even stronger, similar one rule for us and one rule for them with Matt Hancock. Tomorrow there's a big freedom march in London. I would suggest that however many thousand were going to attend that demonstration, the numbers will have swollen because of the Hancock situation. We have a massive, or Boris has, a massive compliance problem going forward, doesn't he?
He does, and I think that the idea that we might stretch this beyond July the 19th, that's now for the birds. I think Boris is on the run, actually, and I think he possibly regrets having decided on the 21st, or that the 21st Freedom Day will not take place, and they're postponing it 4 weeks. That was a fatal error, compounded by what's happened with Matt Hancock. Matt Hancock is the ultimate symbol of hypocrisy in this government. And if Boris Johnson doesn't act quickly, he will be stained by that if he hasn't already.
Absolutely. I mean, why he couldn't see that this was the moment to act is just simply beyond me. One last question, Trevor, if you don't mind. It's a different topic. But just this afternoon, it has emerged that the Justice Department has decided to challenge the parole board, who had previously decided that Colin Pitchfork, who murdered and raped two schoolgirls back in the 1980s, is fit to be released into the public. Many of us could not believe that decision by the parole board, but that's what they came to the conclusion was the thing to do. The Justice Department, just as it did in the case of John Warboys, is now going to challenge that. So it does look as if Pitchfork probably won't get out now. But why does the parole board keep making these crazy decisions about people that should not be released into the community?
Well, it's inexplicable, isn't it, Kevin? And I think that this has been a long time coming. It should have been squashed the moment that the possibility even first emerged. And the parole board, like many of these quangos and other appointees, these committees and groups who carry enormous power and authority over important aspects of our lives, need to be very carefully examined. And in the case of the parole board, I think they need to be either wound up or reformed, and the powers they have to simply set people free who are a menace to society should be taken away from them.
Totally, and it does look like common sense has prevailed. I want to just say before you go, Trevor, that those people who think that newspapers are good for nothing should look at the Sun today and realise how important they can be.